There is a specific kind of pain you carry that you have never said out loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't have a name you'd use in conversation. It shows up at strange hours, driving home, brushing your teeth, lying awake at 2 a.m. for no reason you can point to. A feeling that you are being quietly punished for something, not by a person, not by God, exactly, by life itself, as if some invisible ledger is being kept, and you are always slightly behind. Maybe you replay an old mistake and feel your chest tighten, even though it's been years. Maybe you succeed at something, and instead of joy, you feel dread, waiting for the moment it gets taken away. Maybe you've quietly decided, somewhere below conscious thought, that you don't quite deserve ease. That suffering is simply your tax for existing. You've treated your pain as a verdict, as proof that something is wrong with you. Maybe you've even started keeping score against yourself without realizing it, noting every time you fell short, every time you disappointed someone, every time the gap between who you wanted to be and who you actually were showed itself, and quietly filing it away as further evidence in a case that never seems to close. You don't even remember agreeing to be tried. You just woke up one day already standing in the dock, already assuming guilt, already bracing for the sentence. But what if it isn't a verdict at all? What if the ache you've been trying to escape, silence, or apologize for has been trying to tell you something the entire time, and you've spent years running from a message instead of reading it? The man who understood this better than almost anyone lived it before he wrote it. Fyodor Dostoevsky was sentenced to death for his political beliefs, stood before a firing squad, and was pulled back from execution at the last possible second. A mock execution staged by the state as punishment in itself. He spent years afterward in a Siberian labor camp, chained among murderers and thieves, watching human beings at their most broken. He lived with epilepsy, crushing debt, and the kind of guilt that doesn't come from committing a crime, but from surviving one. Out of that, he arrived at something strange and freeing. Suffering, he believed, was not evidence of a life gone wrong. It was often the exact evidence of a life gone deep, a conscience still working, still awake, still trying to tell you the truth. In the next few minutes, we're going to walk through 6 turning points drawn from Dostoevsky's life and his characters. The guilt-ridden, the numb, the performing, the ones who finally broke and were rebuilt more honestly than before. By the end, you'll understand the exact difference between suffering that punishes you and suffering that is trying to teach you. And there is one moment near the end of this video, the moment almost everyone in Dostoevsky's stories has to face. That changes how you'll hear your own pain from now on. Stay with me until then. It matters more than the beginning does. Chapter 1. The wound you keep apologizing for. Most people don't think of their pain as information. They think of it as a flaw. Somewhere early, you learned to read discomfort as a character defect. An anxious stomach before a hard conversation wasn't your body preparing you. It was proof you were weak. A wave of grief that arrived uninvited wasn't your heart processing a loss. It was proof you couldn't get over it like other people seemingly could. A recurring shame about something you did years ago wasn't your conscience still working. It was proof you were fundamentally bad. This is the quiet lie underneath so much modern suffering. The belief that pain is a verdict on your worth, rather than a signal about your situation. Dostoevsky lived directly inside this confusion, and he gave it a face. Raskolnikov, the young man at the center of crime and punishment, who commits a terrible act and then spends the entire novel not evading the police, but evading his own conscience. The physical world barely touches him. He isn't tormented by the threat of prison. He's tormented by something quieter and far more relentless, the unbearable weight of his own guilt, gnawing at him whether or not anyone else ever finds out. And here is the detail almost everyone misses when they read that story only as a crime thriller. Raskolnikov's suffering isn't punishment being inflicted on him from outside. It's information rising up from inside, his own mind, refusing to let him pretend that what happened didn't matter. His guilt is not cruelty, it's clarity trying to break through denial. Think about your own life for a moment. Not the biggest wound, the smaller, quieter one. The one you've learned to manage rather than examine. The tightness that shows up around a certain person. The dread that arrives before a specific kind of conversation. The heaviness that follows a certain choice, even when you tell yourself it was fine. You've probably spent years trying to make that feeling go away, through distraction, through busyness, through convincing yourself it isn't a big deal. But what if the feeling was never the problem? What if the feeling was the messenger, and you've been shooting it on sight before you ever read what it came to say? There's a man I'll call Mikhail. For most of his adult life, he described himself as someone who doesn't dwell. He prided himself on moving forward quickly. A breakup, a job loss, a falling out with his brother, all filed away and left behind within weeks. He thought this was resilience. What he didn't notice was the low, constant hum underneath his days. A background static of unease he'd had for so long, he assumed it was just what being alive felt like. It wasn't until his late 30s, sitting in a doctor's waiting room after a health scare that turned out to be minor, that something cracked open. He suddenly found himself sobbing, not about the health scare, but about his brother, about the falling out he'd moved on from a decade earlier, that he had, in fact, never once actually grieved. The feeling hadn't disappeared when he stopped looking at it. It had simply been waiting, patiently, for 11 years. Not to punish him, but to finally be heard. This is the first shift this video wants to offer you. Your suffering is very often not a sign that something is wrong with you. It's a sign that something inside you is still alive, still paying attention, still refusing to let a real thing be treated as unreal. Numb people don't feel guilt. Numb people don't feel grief that returns uninvited. The very fact that something in you keeps surfacing this pain means a part of you is still working correctly, still keeping faith with the truth, even when the rest of you would rather look away. Dostoevsky would have called this the beginning of consciousness itself, the discomfort of a mind that refuses to lie to itself completely, even when lying would be so much easier. Consider how differently you might move through a hard week if you simply changed the question you ask yourself in the middle of it. Not what is wrong with me that I feel this way, but what is this feeling actually pointing toward? The first question turns you into a defendant, forced to argue for your own worth. The second question turns you into an investigator, simply following a thread wherever it leads. One of these postures produces shame, the other produces understanding. They can be aimed at the exact same feeling, and yet they lead to entirely different places. This is not a trivial reframe, even though it sounds almost too simple to matter. Most people spend years in the defendant's chair without ever realizing there was another seat available to them. They cross-examine themselves relentlessly. Why do I always do this? Why can't I just get over it? What is broken in me? And the verdict, again and again, comes back guilty. Because a defendant's chair is designed to produce a verdict, not an understanding. The investigator's chair produces something else entirely, a map. Not I am flawed, but here is where this pain seems to originate. Here is what it seems to want. Here is what it has been trying to tell me since before I was willing to listen. Mikhail's 11 years of unexamined grief were not 11 years of nothing happening. They were 11 years of a feeling patiently trying to get his attention, using whatever channel it could. A background unease here, a strange tightness there, an inexplicable flatness on certain anniversaries he never consciously tracked. He had assumed the silence meant the wound had closed on its own. It hadn't. It had simply been waiting for a witness, willing to actually listen to the testimony, rather than dismiss it before it could speak. That is the invitation of this chapter. Before we move further into the parts of this that get harder, the next time an old ache rises in you unbidden, Resist the urge to sentence yourself for feeling it. Ask it, instead, what it came to say. You may not get a clear answer immediately. Dostoevsky rarely offers his characters clear answers immediately either. But the posture itself, curious rather than condemning, is very often the first real movement toward whatever healing eventually becomes possible. That discomfort isn't your enemy. It might be the most honest part of you. Chapter 2, Guilt is not the same as shame here, is where most people get tangled, and where Dostoevsky offers something genuinely precise. Guilt says, I did something that didn't align with who I want to be. Shame says, I am something that shouldn't exist. One is a compass, the other is a cage. Guilt, in its healthy form, is directional. It points somewhere. It says, repair this, apologize here, change this pattern, tell this truth you've been avoiding. It has an exit built into it, because it's about an action, and actions can be addressed. Shame has no exit, because it isn't about what you did. It's about who you supposedly are. And you can't repair a self. You can only hide it, perform around it, or slowly suffocate under it. This is the trap almost every character in Dostoevsky's world falls into at some point, mistaking the compass for the cage, treating a specific addressable wrongdoing as proof of a permanently rotten core. And once a person believes their core is rotten, something strange and self-destructive tends to follow. They start acting in ways that prove the belief correct. Not because they're bad, but because a mind convinced of its own worthlessness stops expecting good outcomes for itself, and slowly, almost without noticing, stops choosing them. This is worth pausing on, because modern psychology arrived at the same divide from a completely different direction, decades later. Shame researchers have long distinguished between guilt, feeling bad about a behavior, and shame, feeling bad about one's entire identity. And the finding is almost eerily aligned with what Dostoevsky dramatized a century earlier. Guilt tends to motivate repair and reconnection, while shame tends to drive people toward hiding, isolation, and further harmful behavior. Two very different traditions, a psychiatric literature and a Russian novelist writing from a prison camp, arriving at the same map of the human interior. What this means for you is simple, though not easy. The next time you feel a wave of I'm a bad person wash over you, try translating it. Ask what the specific action underneath it actually is. Not I am selfish, but I didn't call her back when she needed me, and I know it. Not I'm a failure, but I quit that project halfway through, and some part of me is still uneasy about it. Almost every unbearable shame identity, when you actually look closely, is built on top of a much smaller, much more addressable guilt. The identity feels infinite and inescapable. The action is finite and can, in fact, be dealt with through an apology, a changed pattern, a returned phone call, an honest conversation you've been avoiding for entirely too long. Dostoevsky believed something like this, that human beings are rarely condemned by their actual wrongdoing so much as by their refusal to look directly at it. The unexamined guilt curdles into shame. The examined guilt, however painful in the moment, tends to resolve because it was never trying to destroy you. It was only ever trying to redirect you. You can see this curdling process happen in real time if you watch closely. A person does something small and thoughtless, cancels on a friend last minute, snaps at a partner after a hard day, forgets a commitment they meant to keep. In the first moment, the feeling is usually proportional, a flicker of regret, a mental note to make it right. But if that small guilt isn't acknowledged and addressed within some reasonable window, it doesn't simply fade. It tends to metastasize. The mind, uncomfortable with an open, unresolved account, starts generalizing outward. I forgot to call her back becomes, given enough silence and enough time, I'm the kind of person who lets people down. A single, correctable action has quietly been promoted into an entire identity, and identities are far harder to repair than actions ever were. This is precisely why delay is so costly when it comes to guilt. the apology you keep meaning to make, the conversation you keep postponing, the amends you keep telling yourself you'll get to eventually. Every day that specific guilt goes unaddressed is another day it has to calcify into something broader and less true about you. Dostoevsky's characters who suffer longest are almost always the ones who delay longest. Raskolnikov's torment stretches across the length of an entire novel, largely because he keeps finding new ways to avoid the one direct act, confession. That would actually resolve what months of secrecy could not. This is the second shift. Your pain is not a verdict on your worth. Very often, it's a very specific, very addressable piece of information, buried under a much larger and much less accurate story you've told yourself about who you are. There is a particular trick shame plays that's worth naming directly, because once you see it, you start noticing it everywhere. Shame almost always arrives dressed as humility. It sounds, on the surface, like self-awareness. I know I'm difficult. I know I always mess this up. I know I'm not the kind of person people stay for. It has the tone of honesty. But listen closely, and you'll notice it's never actually specific. It never says exactly what happened, exactly when, exactly what could be different next time. It simply repeats a global sentence about your entire identity over and over in a slightly different outfit each time, and mistakes repetition for insight. Guilt, when it's doing its real job, is almost embarrassingly concrete by comparison. It doesn't say I'm a bad friend. It says I haven't called her in 3 months and I know exactly why I've been avoiding it. It doesn't say I always ruin relationships. It says I got defensive last night instead of just admitting I was scared, and I know that's the thing that actually happened. Concrete guilt can be sat with, examined, and eventually acted on. Global shame can only be endured because there's nothing in it to act on, no specific behavior to change, no specific person to speak to, no specific apology to offer. It's a fog, not a signpost. This is why Dostoevsky's characters who eventually find some measure of peace are, almost without exception, the ones who manage to get specific, who stop drowning in the fog of I am a monster and instead force themselves to say, plainly, here is the one thing I did. The specificity is not a lesser, smaller form of accountability. It is the only form of accountability that actually leads anywhere. A global sentence about your worth has no next step. A specific account of an action always does. The compass was never the cage. You just haven't looked at where it's been pointing. Chapter 3. The mask that never rests there is a particular kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with sleep. It's the exhaustion of a person who has built an entire identity around not feeling what they actually feel. The competent one, the easygoing one, the one who has it together, the one who never needs help, never causes problems, never lets the cracks show. From the outside, this looks like strength. From the inside, it is a kind of quiet, endless labor, the labor of performance, sustained every single day, with no days off. Dostoevsky wrote an entire, strange, uncomfortable little book almost entirely about this. Notes from Underground. Its narrator is bitter, isolated, and painfully self-aware in a way that offers him no relief at all. He has built a fortress of intellectual superiority and cynicism specifically, so that no one, including himself, can see how much he actually longs for connection, and how much he's terrified of being truly known. He sabotages the one real chance at intimacy the story offers him, not because he doesn't want it, but because wanting it, and being seen wanting it, feels more dangerous than being alone forever. This is what a false coping mechanism actually looks like from the inside. Not weakness, architecture, a carefully built structure, engineered specifically to keep the truth of your own need, grief, or fear from ever reaching the surface where someone, even you, might have to look at it. Maybe your version isn't cynicism, maybe it's control, the relentless need to manage every variable, because uncertainty feels like free fall. Maybe it's overachievement, proving your worth through output because rest feels like it might reveal you have none. Maybe it's isolation dressed up as independence. I just don't need people much. When what's actually happening is that needing people once went badly, and you decided, quietly, never again. None of these are moral failures. They are, almost without exception, intelligent adaptations to something that once hurt. The underground man built his fortress because somewhere earlier, being open had cost him something he couldn't afford to lose again. The tragedy Dostoevsky is pointing at isn't that he protected himself. It's that the protection, over time, became a prison that kept out the very thing he was trying to protect: his capacity for real connection, real feeling, real life. There's a woman I'll call Elena, who spent nearly a decade being described by everyone around her as so put together. She managed a demanding job, ran a household, showed up for friends in crisis, and rarely, if ever, asked for anything in return. People admired her. Some envied her. What almost none of them knew was that Elena hadn't cried in front of another person since she was 22 years old, not at her father's funeral, not during her divorce, not once. She had decided, somewhere along the way, that her value was located entirely in her capacity to hold everything together for everyone else. Needing something herself felt, to her nervous system, like a kind of failure she couldn't survive. It took a minor car accident, no one hurt, just a totaled car and a bad scare to finally crack something open. Sitting on the curb waiting for a tow truck, she found herself crying in a way she hadn't in over a decade, and it terrified her more than the accident had. Not because the crying was dangerous, because it revealed, undeniably, how much she'd been carrying, completely alone, for years, behind a mask so convincing that even she had half believed it. This is the pattern worth naming clearly. The false self is not fake in the sense of being lazy or dishonest for its own sake. It is a survival structure. It did its job. It got you through something, but a structure built for survival is not the same as a structure built for living, and eventually, almost everyone who relies too long on the mask discovers the same exhausting truth. It takes more energy to maintain a performance than it ever would have taken to simply be seen. Dostoevsky's underground man never breaks free of his fortress. That's what makes the book so uncomfortable. It refuses to give you the easy ending. But it also makes his warning sharper. This is what happens if the mask is never examined. It doesn't dissolve on its own. It calcifies. And the person inside it grows more isolated, not less, the longer the performance continues. You are not required to end up like him. But the first step out of that fortress is the same for everyone, noticing, honestly, without punishing yourself for it, that the fortress exists at all. It can help to ask yourself a quiet, unglamorous question. Who would be disappointed, or confused, or even a little unsettled, if they saw the parts of you that never make it into the performance? Not because you owe anyone an unedited version of yourself at all times. Some privacy is simply healthy, but because the answer often reveals exactly how large the gap has grown between the self you show and the self you actually are. A small gap is simply called being a person in the world. A large, long-maintained gap is what Dostoevsky's underground man was living inside. And it is exhausting in a way that has nothing to do with how much sleep you're getting. Notice too that the fortress rarely announces itself as a fortress. It announces itself as a virtue. Elena's mask wore the name reliable. Mikhail's mask wore the name resilient. The underground man's mask wore the name too intelligent to need anyone. This is precisely what makes these structures so difficult to see in yourself. They are usually built out of your actual strengths, repurposed as armor. The very qualities people compliment you for are often the ones doing the most work to keep your real self hidden. This isn't a reason to distrust your strengths. It's a reason to occasionally ask what they might be protecting, and whether that protection is still necessary, or whether it has quietly outlived its original purpose and simply become a habit you've never questioned. Chapter 4. The freedom you were afraid of here is something almost no one expects to hear. Many people are not actually afraid of suffering. They are afraid of freedom. Dostoevsky explored this most directly in a haunting parable he wrote called The Grand Inquisitor, embedded inside his final novel. In it, a church official essentially accuses Christ of making a terrible mistake, giving human beings freedom of conscience, rather than simply telling them what to believe and do. The Inquisitor argues that most people don't actually want freedom. Freedom is heavy. Freedom means you are responsible for your own choices, your own meaning, your own moral compass, with no one to blame and no certainty to hide behind. Most people, he claims, would rather trade that freedom for comfort, certainty, and someone else to answer to. It's a disturbing argument. And the disturbing part is how often it's true, not about other people, but about all of us, in smaller, quieter ways, every single day. Think about how often you've handed your freedom to something else without noticing. The freedom to decide what you actually believe, traded for whatever your social circle already believes, because disagreement feels unbearably lonely. The freedom to choose what your life should look like, traded for whatever timeline you inherited from your family, your culture. Your sense of what a successful life is supposed to resemble by a certain age. The freedom to feel your actual feelings, traded for whatever emotional performance keeps the people around you comfortable. Every one of these trades feels, in the moment, like relief. Certainty is easier to carry than freedom. Someone else's rules are easier to follow than the slow, uncertain work of building your own. But Dostoevsky's warning is that this relief is a kind of quiet death. A person who never exercises their freedom slowly stops being able to locate themselves inside their own life. They wake up years later and don't recognize the person looking back at them, because that person was built entirely out of other people's expectations. This is why suffering so often shows up exactly at the edges of freedom. In the moment, you're finally deciding something for yourself, rather than following the script. The anxiety before telling your family you're not doing the thing they expected. The grief of leaving a life that looked right on paper, but never felt like yours. The disorientation of realizing you don't actually know what you want, because you've never once been asked, including by yourself. This suffering is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's the exact weight Dostoevsky said freedom always carries. It is the tax on becoming a self, rather than a performance of one. And this is worth being precise about, because it connects to something researchers in the psychology of autonomy have documented again and again. Human beings report their deepest sense of meaning not from comfort or certainty, but from feeling that their choices are genuinely their own. Even when those choices are hard, even when they involve real loss. Comfort and meaning, it turns out, are not the same currency. You can have a great deal of one and almost none of the other. The Grand Inquisitor was offering people comfort in exchange for their freedom. Dostoevsky, through the whole shape of that parable, was quietly arguing that the trade is a trap, that comfort purchased with your own freedom leaves you fed, housed, safe, and hollow. There is a reason so many people describe major life decisions, leaving a marriage that looks fine from the outside, walking away from a stable career, telling the truth about what they actually want rather than what they're expected to want, as some of the most agonizing moments of their lives, even when, years later, they describe those same decisions as the best ones they ever made. The agony and the rightness are not contradictory. They are, according to Dostoevsky's whole vision of freedom, simply two names for the same event. Becoming the author of your own life instead of a character in someone else's script was never going to feel light. It was only ever going to feel like yours. This also explains something that confuses a lot of people about their own suffering. Why does it sometimes get harder right when you start doing better? Why does the anxiety spike right as you finally set the boundary, finally leave the situation, finally say the true thing out loud? It's tempting to read this as evidence that you made a mistake. that the old comfort, however hollow, was safer after all. But Dostoevsky's framework offers a different reading. That spike of difficulty is very often simply the unfamiliar weight of freedom, arriving all at once after years of it being handed off to someone or something else. It is not proof you went the wrong way. It is proof you are, for perhaps the first time, actually carrying your own life. If you are in a season of your life where a choice in front of you feels unbearably heavy, not because it's objectively dangerous, but because it's yours, entirely yours, with no one else to blame if it goes wrong, that heaviness is not a warning to turn back. It might be the exact weight of finally becoming someone real. Chapter 5. The night the mask cracks, there comes a point, for almost everyone living inside a false self, when the structure simply cannot hold anymore. It doesn't usually arrive as a dramatic, cinematic collapse. More often, it arrives quietly, almost embarrassingly small, a minor disagreement that suddenly brings you to tears you can't explain. A wave of anger, wildly disproportionate to whatever triggered it, that frightens you with its intensity. A night where you cannot stop crying and have no idea, specifically, what you're crying about, only that it feels like it's been building for years, possibly your entire life, and has finally found a crack wide enough to escape through. This is the moment Dostoevsky returns to again and again in his major novels, because he understood something crucial about human suffering. The collapse is not the tragedy. The collapse is the opportunity. It is the moment the performance finally becomes too expensive to maintain, and something truer is finally allowed to surface. Raskolnikov's collapse takes the shape of fever and near madness in the weeks after his crime, his body and mind essentially forcing what his will refuses to do consciously. He cannot eat properly. He cannot sleep. He wanders the city half delirious, drawn back again and again to the scene of what he did, as though some part of him is desperate to be caught. Desperate to finally stop carrying the unbearable weight of a secret his conscience refuses to let him keep. His breakdown looks, from the outside, like sickness. From the inside, Dostoevsky shows us it's something closer to a soul, refusing to be silenced any longer. This is the turning point this entire video has been building toward, so sit with it carefully. The false self, the performance, the mask, the fortress, the endless management of appearances requires a specific kind of energy to maintain, the energy of vigilance. You have to constantly monitor what you're allowed to feel, what you're allowed to show, what version of you is acceptable in this room, with this person, in this moment. This vigilance is exhausting in a way that never fully announces itself. Because you've usually been doing it so long, it feels like simply how you are, rather than a constant, draining performance. But vigilance, like any resource, is finite. And at some point, after enough years, enough unacknowledged grief, enough unexpressed anger, enough unmet need quietly stockpiled in the basement of yourself, the resource runs out. And when it runs out, what's underneath does not ask politely for permission to surface. It breaks through. Often at the worst possible moment. Often over something that seems, on its surface, far too small to justify the size of the reaction. If this has happened to you, if you've ever sobbed over something minor and felt confused and embarrassed by your own intensity, if you've ever exploded in anger disproportionate to the offense, if you've ever simply stopped functioning for a day or two with no clear external cause, you have likely mistaken this for a personal failure. A sign of weakness, evidence that you're too much, or too sensitive, or somehow broken in a way other people aren't. Here is what Dostoevsky would want you to understand instead, and it's the single most important reframe in this entire video, that collapse was not a malfunction. It was the truth finally becoming too large to keep hidden. It was years of unread information, finally forcing its way to the surface where it could, for the first time, actually be read. Think of it this way. A body running a fever isn't malfunctioning, it's fighting something, doing exactly what it's supposed to do under the circumstances. even though the process is uncomfortable and even frightening to experience. Your emotional collapse, when it finally comes, is often doing the same work. It is not the disease. It is the immune response. It is the mask finally failing, not because you're weak, but because something truer in you has simply gotten too strong, too insistent, too alive to keep pretending doesn't exist. This is the part almost no one tells you in advance. And it's why this moment is so often misunderstood and so deeply feared. The breaking point does not feel like relief while it's happening. It feels like the worst thing that has ever happened to you. It feels like proof of everything you were afraid was true about yourself, that you're fragile, that you're failing, that you can't hold your life together the way everyone else seems to. But on the other side of that specific night, the one where the mask cracks, where the fever finally breaks, where you finally stop being able to perform the version of yourself you'd been maintaining, something changes that cannot change any other way. You are, for the first time in longer than you can remember, not managing an appearance. You are simply, unbearably, honestly yourself. Undefended, unrehearsed, real. It is the most frightening place a person can stand. There's something worth saying plainly here, because this is the moment in the video where the temptation to look away is strongest. If you are currently somewhere near this point, if the mask you've maintained for years is starting to feel unbearably heavy, if small things have started cracking you open in ways that embarrass you, if you've had a night recently that frightened you with how much came pouring out, you are not failing at your own life. You are arriving later than you might have wanted, but not too late, at the exact threshold Dostoevsky placed nearly every one of his most important characters. None of them got to skip it. Not Raskolnikov, not the underground man who at least glimpsed it, even if he ultimately retreated. Not the countless smaller figures scattered through his novels who spend years performing a self that finally, unavoidably, gives out. What almost none of them had, and what you have right now, sitting here listening to this, is the chance to meet that threshold with even a small amount of warning, to recognize it when it comes, not as evidence that you are broken, but as evidence that something long buried has finally gathered enough force to be heard. That reframe alone will not make the night easier when it arrives. But it may keep you from doing what so many people do in that moment, reaching for the nearest available way to silence it again, to rebuild the mask a little thicker, to promise yourself you'll never let it get that bad again, mistaking the crack for the injury, rather than recognizing it as the first real opportunity for repair. It is also, Dostoevsky insisted, the only place real change has ever actually started. Chapter 6. Confession is not collapse if the breaking point is the crisis. Confession is what turns the crisis into a doorway. Not confession in the narrow, religious sense, though Dostoevsky certainly meant that too, but confession in its widest and most human meaning, telling the truth, out loud, to another person, or even just to yourself, about what has actually been happening underneath the performance. Raskolnikov's arc does not resolve when he's caught. It resolves, slowly, painfully, incompletely, when he finally confesses. Not to escape punishment, but because the weight of carrying the unspoken truth alone had become genuinely unbearable. More unbearable than whatever consequences honesty might bring. The confession doesn't erase what he did. It doesn't undo the suffering. What it does is far more important. It ends his isolation inside the truth. For the first time in the novel, he is not the only one who knows. This is worth separating clearly from collapse, because they can look similar from the outside but function completely differently. Collapse is when the truth escapes you, often against your will, often at the worst possible time, often in a form that frightens you and the people around you. Confession is when you choose to hand the truth to someone, deliberately, before it has to force its way out on its own terms. Confession is harder in the moment. It requires you to speak the thing before you're forced to. But it is, almost always, gentler in its aftermath. because you retain some dignity, some agency in the telling. You are not merely being found out. You are choosing to be known. This is the part of the process most people skip, because it is, frankly, terrifying. It is far easier to let a truth leak out sideways, through irritability, through withdrawal, through the occasional breakdown that everyone quietly agrees not to discuss afterward, than to sit across from another human being and say, plainly, here is what has actually been happening. Here is what I actually did. Here is what I actually feel. Here is what I actually need. But something happens in that moment of deliberate honesty that nothing else can substitute for. The isolation that has been quietly compounding your suffering, the sense that you are carrying something no one else could understand, or that you'd be rejected if anyone truly saw it, breaks. Usually not because the other person responds perfectly, but simply because the truth is no longer yours alone to carry. Dostoevsky believed something close to this, that human beings are not saved by being flawless. They are saved, if they're saved at all, by being known, fully, including the parts they were most afraid to show, and discovering that they are still worthy of connection anyway. This is not a comfortable idea. It requires the humiliation of exposure before it offers the relief of belonging. But he returns to it again and again across his novels, because he seemed to believe it was one of the only reliable paths out of the isolation that suffering, left unexamined, tends to create. If there is a truth you have been managing rather than telling, to a partner, a friend, a parent, or simply to the mirror, this chapter is not asking you to announce it publicly or perform some dramatic reveal. It's asking something smaller and more specific. Choose one person. Choose one true sentence you've been avoiding, and say it plainly before the pressure of holding it finds its own, less controlled way out. You will not feel lighter instantly. Dostoevsky never promises that. What you will feel, almost without exception, is less alone inside the thing you've been carrying, and that, it turns out, is very often the actual beginning of healing, rather than some separate reward that comes only after the pain is fully resolved. It's worth being honest about the risk here too, because Dostoevsky never pretended confession was safe. Sometimes the person you tell responds badly. Sometimes the truth changes a relationship in ways you can't control or predict. This is precisely why confession requires more courage than collapse. Collapse happens to you, but confession is a choice you make while still able to choose otherwise. And yet, even in Dostoevsky's darkest tellings of this pattern, the alternative is worse. A life spent managing an ever-growing distance between who you appear to be and who you actually are, until the distance itself becomes the loneliest place a person can live. The risk of being known imperfectly is real. The certainty of the isolation that comes from never being known at all is, in the long run, far heavier. There is also a quieter form of confession worth naming, for the moments when telling another person isn't yet possible, or safe, or wise. You can confess to a page. You can confess to a walk taken alone, speaking the sentence out loud to no one but the air. You can confess simply to yourself. In the specific and concrete language this video has been building toward, not "I am a terrible person," but "here is the exact thing I did, and here is what I am going to do about it." Even this smaller act loosens something. It is not the full relief of being known by another person, but it is the necessary first draft of it. And for many people, it's the draft that makes the harder, fuller confession possible later on. Resolution and integration, something quieter, happens after the confession, after the collapse, after the mask has finally cracked and been set down. It isn't a happy ending in the way that phrase usually gets used. Dostoevsky never gives his characters a clean, triumphant resolution, and he wouldn't want us pretending real life offers one either. Raskolnikov, at the close of Crime and Punishment, is not suddenly at peace. He is at the beginning of a long, difficult road toward it. Years of hard labor ahead of him. a changed man, but not yet a finished one. The novel ends not with resolution, but with the first honest step toward it. Dostoevsky seemed to believe that was the truest ending available to anyone, not a rival, but honest direction. This is worth sitting with, because so much of modern life sells you the opposite promise, that healing is a destination you arrive at and then simply live inside, untroubled, forever after. That isn't how it tends to actually work, and pretending otherwise sets people up to feel like failures the moment old pain resurfaces, as it almost always does, at least occasionally, for the rest of a life. What actually seems to change for the people who do this work, the Raskolnikovs, the Mikhails, the Elenas, and quite possibly you, is not that the pain disappears entirely. It's that the relationship to the pain changes completely. The guilt that once felt like a verdict on your worth becomes, instead, information you know how to read. The old shame that once felt infinite gets translated back down into specific, addressable actions. Apologies you can make, patterns you can change, conversations you can finally have. The mask that once felt necessary for survival gets set down, not all at once, but a little more each time you choose honesty over performance, and discover again and again that you survive it. You will still have hard nights. You will still, sometimes, feel that old tightening in your chest, that old dread, that old certainty that something is wrong with you rather than something is simply true and needs attending to. The difference, and it is the entire difference, is that you will know now what to do with it. You will ask what it's pointing toward instead of what it's condemning you for. You will treat the ache as a message rather than a sentence. This is not a small shift. It is, in fact, close to everything. Elena, the woman who hadn't cried in front of anyone for a decade, did not transform into someone who cries easily and comfortably about everything. That isn't what happened, and it wasn't the goal. What happened instead is smaller and more durable. She started telling one or two people the truth about how hard things actually were, instead of managing everyone's comfort at the expense of her own honesty. She still overfunctions sometimes. She still catches herself performing put together when she's not. But now she notices it. Now she can choose, at least sometimes, to set it down. Mikhail, the man who didn't dwell, still sometimes moves too fast past pain, out of old habit. But he calls his brother now. Not because the decade of distance was ever fully repaired, some of it can't be, but because he stopped mistaking speed for strength and started understanding that the ache he'd been outrunning for 11 years had simply been trying, patiently, to bring him home to something he'd abandoned. This is what integration actually looks like. Not a person who no longer suffers, a person who has learned to suffer differently, awake, informed, no longer mistaking the ache for a verdict, no longer requiring a mask to survive it, no longer alone inside it. There is one more distinction worth making before we close, because it separates this whole way of thinking from something that could easily be mistaken for it. None of this is a case for seeking out suffering, or romanticizing pain, or treating a hard life as inherently more meaningful than an easy one. Dostoevsky was not interested in suffering for its own sake, and neither should you be. The claim here is narrower and, in its own way, more useful. Suffering that has already arrived, uninvited, as most real suffering does, is not automatically a sign of failure. It can be read, it can be worked with. It is not, by itself, proof that your life has gone wrong. That is a very different claim from suggesting you should chase difficulty in search of depth. You don't need to manufacture pain to have something to learn from. Life will bring you enough of it on its own, and when it does, you now have a different way to meet it than the one you probably grew up with. It's also worth saying plainly that this way of relating to pain is not a solitary achievement, something you're meant to accomplish entirely alone through sheer force of insight. Dostoevsky's own characters rarely heal in isolation. Raskolnikov's slow turn toward honesty happens in relationship, through the patient. Unglamorous presence of people willing to stay near him even at his worst. If any of this chapter has felt like a private assignment, a new way to grade yourself in solitude, that's worth noticing too, because it may simply be the old performance finding a new disguise. I'll process this perfectly and alone, so no one has to see me struggling with it. The truer path, the one this whole tradition keeps pointing toward, usually runs through at least one other person, however frightening that feels. Dostoevsky spent a life that most people would call unbearable: exile, mock execution, debt, illness, grief, arriving at something that reads, on the page, almost like tenderness, that suffering, honestly faced, does not prove you are broken. It proves you are still capable of truth. And a person still capable of truth, however much it costs them, is never as lost as they believe themselves to be in the middle of the pain. You are allowed to still be in the middle of it right now. You are allowed to not have this figured out yet. The only thing being asked of you, the only thing Dostoevsky ever really asked of anyone, in the end, is to stop treating the pain as an enemy to defeat and start treating it as a voice worth finally listening to. We began this video with a specific, familiar ache, the sense that some invisible ledger is being kept against you, that your pain is a verdict, that you're somehow being punished simply for existing the way you are. If any part of the last several minutes found you at a moment when you needed it, if some old guilt, some old mask, some old exhausted performance of yourself suddenly made a little more sense, consider staying close to this channel. Share it with someone you know who is quietly carrying something similar. The way almost everyone, at some point, is. There is no ledger keeping score against you. There never was. There is only information, arriving imperfectly, waiting for you to finally read it. Suffering is not punishment, it's information. And you, even now, even in the middle of it, are still fully capable of hearing what it has to say.